Since I've been quilting a lot lately, I have a big pile that I've accumulated of strips of batting that I've cut off as I've trimmed my quilts after I finished quilting them and am ready to bind them. So I hate throwing away perfectly good batting, so I tried different ways to be able to use them, and I just don't make enough pot holders or different small items like that. So I decided to try piecing them together so I can use them in smaller quilts like baby quilts or like for this wall hanging. So I'm going to show you how I get my strips ready to use for piecing them together on the back of a quilt. So let's get started. So the first thing you'll want to do is make sure your strips have a side on that of them that is pretty straight. So usually when I trim around my quilt after I'm finished quilting it, I usually trim them off pretty straight because I'll either use a rotary cutter and a ruler or something like that. So I usually don't have to straighten them up, but if you get really crazy cuts, you'll want to make sure you straighten those out or it'll be difficult piecing them together. So I just lay my batting strips out over the quilt I'm going to be working on and make sure I have enough strips, and then I'm just going to trim up. It's not in the camera, so I'll trim up here on this side to kind of match them up. And it doesn't need to be perfect because this is all overlap over the side of your quilt anyway. So it'll all get trimmed off later. And I'll just keep laying them out until the entire quilt is covered and I know I have enough strips. So one thing I want to point out is you'll probably want to make sure you have the same batting that you're piecing together. So don't use like a cotton and a polyester or anything like that. Make sure it's the same batting. I even use the same batting type when I'm doing this, just because I think it works a little bit better, making sure that you're going to get the same feel throughout the quilt. So I was able to cover this in 4. So you see I have 4 strips there, and now we're going to head to the sewing machine to piece them together. Okay, so we're at the sewing machine, and what we're going to do is select the zigzag stitch, and you can widen it if you would like to. I keep it at the setting it's at. It seems to work fine for me. And then I'm going to line up the middle, that line that we're joining between the 2 battings, right in the middle of my foot. Now if you notice, my batting has a side that's textured and a side that is not. I make sure to sew all the textured sides facing the same direction. So I don't want one side to be textured over here and the other side to be the side that's not textured. I want them to be the same. Okay, so I have it set together and I'm just going to start sewing them. Okay, and you're going to probably want to go really slow at first to make sure that you're keeping the center of your foot on that piece area that we're sewing together. And you'll see that the zigzag kind of pulls them together. I've had before where I've had pieces that aren't as straight as I probably should have made sure they were, and the zigzag stitch really pulls them together nicely. I have just a cream thread in here that matches nicely with the batting. I don't think the color of thread matters as much if you are using darker colors on your quilt, but you definitely won't want to do this with a really dark thread if you're going to be using really light colors in your quilt top, because it will likely show through. And you just want these pieces of batting to be touching each other. You don't want them overlapping, because if you overlap them, you will feel that difference in width of the batting through your quilt top. So really be careful to make sure they're just touching together, just kissing each other and not overlapping. Okay, so I'm going to sew these two together and then add on the next two and just chain piece those, and then I will be sewing the final two together right down the middle. So as you can see, I finished sewing the first two together, and now I'm just going to start sewing the next two. Okay, there you can see the zigzag stitch that holds them together, and I mean, it's a really strong hold. So I don't worry about this as a method at all. It holds together nicely, and then once you put it between your quilt layers and quilt it, I don't think you're gonna get movement out of it at all. And I have tried feeling on quilts that I've done before and find this line here of stitching, and I don't feel it through the top or the bottom of the quilt at all. Since we're not overlapping the layers and just kissing them together, you really cannot tell at all where that is. And I think it really comes in handy with these scraps to use them, especially for wall hanging quilts, and save some money on buying a whole new piece of batting. So I have these two sewn together, these two strips sewn together, and so now all I need to do is sew the middle together, and I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to line up the two in the middle of my foot, and I'm going to have to tuck this side in under the arm of my sewing machine, and I'm just going to sew across. I don't bother back stitching here or anything like that, because this is all going to get cut off at the end anyway, because I'm going to center my quilt top in the middle of this and the backing behind it, and I'm going to have to trim up everything after I'm done quilting my quilt. So back stitching, I've never bothered with it at this point. For some people it's just a habit, so it's not going to hurt at all if you do that. It's just, I don't bother. Alright, so just finish off sewing down your last pieced set of batting. Okay, so here is my batting all pieced together. You can see some of the lines. So I'm just gonna lay my quilt that I'm using this for on top of it, just to make sure that I did get it big enough and it looks good. You can see all sides have some batting covering it. And I just also wanted to share this pattern because it is really cute. So it actually came in my PreCutsQuilt shop monthly quilting box, and it is the Moda Through the Years Kansas Troubles Quilters kit, and this is the pattern that it came with it and the fabric. So it's a really cute kit. I love getting my boxes from the PreCutsQuilt shop. In the description here, I'll put a link to the unboxing for this, just so you can see everything you get. It's on my blog, createbeautifulquilts.com, but I'll put the link straight to this unboxing. So hopefully this gave you some ideas for using all your scraps of batting, and it's a nice way to sew it all together and be able to use it in a bigger project rather than just doing small projects like pot holders and things like that. So let me know in the comments what you thought. If you've done this before, tried it, worked out for you. Anyway, I will see you later. Thanks for watching. Bye.